week, as we've been drawing near to Christmas, we've been looking at the sermons of a man by the name of Isaiah, who preached 800 years before the birth of Jesus. And yet he was given the ability by God to speak about that event and predict what would happen when the Lord Jesus Christ came to earth. First of all then, we looked at one of his sermons in which he indicated that a virgin would have a child who was God in human form. We then went further and looked at another of his messages in which he spoke of that child as one who would rule over an everlasting kingdom with divine authority but with tenderness, and will be the supreme source of our knowledge of God. Last night we looked at another passage, another sermon in which he spoke of this child king as a servant king who would come as God's functionary and under God's blessing and empowering would win the hearts of his people through his sympathetic tenderness for their need, rather than demanding obedience and coercion, which is so often characteristic of human power. All of this brings us to his final sermon prediction, which is found in these words: "But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we are healed. We all like sheep have gone astray, each of us has turned to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all." This sermon refers to that same servant king, for earlier in this sermon Isaiah makes that identification. But here he begins by emphasizing the reality of human existence. We all like sheep have gone astray. When I see sheep in a field, very often they seem to simply wander in any direction, driven by what appears to be the smallest of stimuli. They simply may follow another. But when Isaiah speaks about wandering sheep, here he adds a moral dimension. Each of us, he says, has turned to his own way. And in this way Isaiah emphasizes that the problem with human existence is that we are self-centered, not God-centered. He also emphasizes that to act in this way is to fail to meet the expectations that God has of us. He refers to the word transgression and emphasizes by using that word the failure to meet the divine mark. Not only so, but he refers twice to the word iniquity. He was crushed for our iniquity. The iniquity of us all was laid on him. There are various words for sin in the Old Testament, but the word iniquity is the deepest word for sin that we have. It refers to that disease that has infected the core of our very being, that is the source of the sinful conduct and the sinful attitudes and thoughts that so often characterize each one of us. So he says, the servant king will come to such people, but he will come, and by means of his death and resurrection, of which he speaks later in this very sermon, he will suffer the consequences occasioned by human failure. He was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him. By his wounds we are healed. The Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. Not only then will he deal with the problem of sin and guilt, but he will also bring healing to troubled consciences and damaged lives. By his wounds we are healed. Finally, he refers to the peace that he will bring. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him. No reference here to what sort of peace, or whose peace, or peace with whom. is referred to here. If I were to think of peace, the absence of hostility and the restoration of a happy relationship with others, I suppose I would think first of all about the peace between one person and another person. I would reflect too upon the peace within. So often we have troubled minds and hearts. In this week of the Copenhagen summit, I might think of peace with the environment, and all these things are embraced in the word peace here, but above all, there is reference here to peace with God. All of which Isaiah predicted 800 years before Jesus came, and insofar as he predicted accurately the birth of a virgin, of a child to a virgin, so his other words come with a degree of authority that we would not necessarily expect had he not been able to support his case by the most remarkable event of all. And so the challenge comes to you, and it comes to me, to commit ourselves afresh to the service of the servant king, to recognize him as the one who meets our human need,